If you've used coloured pencils before, you would know that it can be super challenging to get those bright white highlights or whiskers to show up on top of your drawing. If you're anything like me, you've probably tried many different products and techniques and just haven't found a good solution. The first option is to use a gel pen or white gouache. Now this seems like a practical and easy way to get bright highlights, but I would only suggest using these two products if you're not planning on selling your work, or you're not worried about it flaking off over time. I've seen people use white gouache, gel pens, acrylic paint, or even watercolour pencils with a wet tip, but all of these options are not actually archival because when you're adding a water-based product on top of a wax or oil-based coloured pencil, it may look fine for a while, but there's potential for your work to be damaged or flake off in the future. And that's totally fine if you're not concerned about that, but personally I wouldn't want my customers coming back to me in a few years' time telling me that the whiskers fell off of their artwork. So the next 4 options are archival ways of creating highlights. You can indent your paper with a toothpick or an embossing tool. This is a popular technique which works really well if you don't use solvent to blend your coloured pencil work. You'll want to use the layering method where you work in light layers with a sharp pencil so that your pencil glides across the paper and skips over those little indents, leaving the white of the paper showing through in those areas. It can be difficult to use this technique if you don't plan out exactly where you want your highlights right at the start, so it's not my favourite way of adding highlights. Also, if you do blend with solvent, the colours can sometimes bleed into the indents anyway, which brings me to the next 3 methods, which you can use with the solvent blending technique. Scraping away the top layer of pigment can be a really great way to get those fine lines. To achieve this technique, you'll need to start out with a lighter colour in your base layer. This colour will actually be the colour that you're scraping down to, so if you want light grey highlights or whiskers in the end, you'll need to use that light grey in the first layer. Then you can just build up your layers with darker colours and then come back through with one of these tools, which is a slice tool. You could also use a craft knife, but you'll have to be a little more careful to not rip the paper. When using your craft knife or slice tool, you want to use it upside down so that the sharpest part isn't cutting through your paper. It sounds weird, but it makes a lot more sense when you're actually doing it, so if you try it, you'll know what I mean. You can use it quite lightly and it will remove the top few layers of coloured pencil to reveal that lighter colour underneath. And there are a few reasons why I don't particularly like this technique personally. One is that you have the potential to rip your paper or cut through it. The second is that if you want to add thicker lines or white highlights in the eyes or clumps of snow on top of animal fur, it can be quite hard to do that. I also don't usually add this much tiny detail and fine lines in my artwork, but I thought I would include this option because it is quite popular and you might like to try it out if you do like doing those fine lines. The next 2 options are my favourite ways of adding white highlights, and I think these are easier and more effective than the last 3 options, and you can use them whether you are blending with solvent or not, and you can use them on any paper that you like. A really simple way to get white highlights is to use a white pencil. Now, not every white pencil is created equally. If you've ever tried to use the Polychromos white pencil, for example, you know that it's pretty useless on a lot of papers. But there are pencils like the Derwent Drawing Chinese White, which are actually really opaque. In fact, this is the whitest coloured pencil that I've found, and it works beautifully on top of multiple layers of coloured pencil. This technique works even better if you use the solvent method to blend, because the solvent helps sink that pigment into the grooves of the paper, which allows some of that tooth to show through for your pencil to stick to. All you need to do is start with a sharp point and a soft to medium pressure to create your lines. And if you want this technique to work even better, using Clairefontaine pastel mat as your surface will really help you be able to get those white highlights even brighter. Adding light colours over dark colours is actually so much easier on pastel mat in comparison to other smoother drawing papers or watercolour papers. If you still can't get the white highlights that you're after with these previous techniques, my last technique will definitely get you those bright highlights, no matter what blending method, paper, or how many layers you've done with your colored pencils. This magical liquid is actually a mix of two products from the brand Brush and Pencil. You can mix their titanium white powder with their touch-up texture liquid to create a paint-like consistency where you can literally paint on your highlights. This almost feels like working with gel pens or gouache, but it's actually archival. These two products are designed to be used with colored pencil and will not affect how archival the work is. They're the only products like it on the market, so I highly recommend getting some. When you're mixing your powder and liquid together, make sure that you mix it quite well to get rid of most of the lumps. It dries quite quickly, so don't add too much to your mix. You can always mix more if you need to. And definitely don't add water to the mixture to keep it wet for longer, because this will no longer be archival. The other great thing about this is that you can actually come back over the top with more colored pencil if you want to tint the white a slightly different color. The touch-up texture liquid by itself is actually clear, so if you have an area of your work where you've added too much pencil and you're trying to add more or fix a mistake, you can apply it to any area of your artwork and it adds some texture back into your paper, which allows you to come back over the top with more pencils. I actually used these last two techniques throughout this drawing of a red panda, so if you want to see how to use them in practice, click on this tutorial in the top left-hand corner and I'll see you over there.